Speaking of the Midwest, though, and more specifically the Plain States, I'm sure most of you have heard about the just horrific and disastrous tornado in the town of Moore, Oklahoma this last week. Moore is actually a suburb of Oklahoma City. There, as of this right now, there are 24 reported dead. After initial reports of more, that the number of 24 is actually most likely to grow bigger. But the devastation there in Oklahoma is just insane and hard to comprehend. I mean, pretty much most of this town is just entirely leveled. Some 30 square miles were just crushed by a tornado. Estimates of damage say it'll be the dollar cost will probably be well over $2 billion. Some are saying up to $3 billion. Most of you know, and I mentioned just a second ago, that I grew up in Nebraska, which is also tornado country. If you're not familiar, we always had tornado drills in school. We had tons of tornado warnings in the summer, where the warning sirens would just blast off, and then you'd have to go down in the basement, in case a tornado hit. It's weird that this really kind of brought back some memories. Some things that kind of stick with you from your childhood. And I still remember one of the local TV stations when I was a kid, whenever there was a tornado warning, they would show this graphic of this just sort of horrific blood red sky with these ominous clouds, and the sky was just red, and they had this giant text, tornado warning, on it. And then they actually had these two little squiggly lines of birds on it. And I gotta tell you, as a kid, that graphic scared the hell out of me. It scared the hell out of me as a kid. And even now, when I think about it, it still kind of creeps me out. And again, it was just like a dumb drawing, but it still freaks me out. I think a lot of it is, associated with when a tornado warning, goes on, you have the giant, air raid sirens going off, and you have to go and run and get in the basement and all that stuff. But speaking of tornado sirens, George Zornick at The Nation magazine has a report on how the organization that handles things like tornado warnings, which is of course the National Weather Service, has faced a amazing amount of budget cuts recently and is actually due to face even more cuts because of the sequester. They're due to actually get another 8% cut in their budgets in the next coming months. Reading from The Nation magazine, quote, "In Oklahoma on Monday, the alert came 16 minutes before the tornado actually touched the ground, which is 3 minutes more than the 13-minute average warning the National Weather Service provides. It triggered emergency broadcast alerts throughout the region and blaring air raid sirens that allowed hundreds of thousands of people to seek shelter." End quote. That's the deal. That's what they're supposed to do. The National Weather Service saves lives. That's what they do. They save lives. And with our brain-dead, idiotic austerity madness that we talk about so much on this show, we are making the jobs of these people so much more difficult. We are literally, with this austerity, putting people's lives at risk. Right now as it stands, even without the thing that's coming through with the sequester, they are woefully understaffed. There's a mandated hiring freeze right now at the National Weather Service. Current employees are being furloughed. The head of the National Weather Service actually wrote recently, he wrote, quote, "Staffing at the weather forecasting offices is already stretched thin. The very people we count on to be alert for watches and warnings are working overtime and changing from day shift to night shift and back in the same week. Unfortunately, it will only take one bad storm to show that NOAA is dangerously cutting corners in the wrong places." End quote. And, this guy is warning us here. These people are warning us. They're telling us we are in trouble. And I don't know about you, but just think about this. What kind of sick, twisted politician wants the employees at a life-saving organization, which is the National Weather Service, what kind of people wants those employees strung out and exhausted and working double shifts or working, shifting from day shift to night shift? I mean, why would you want them to even have to do that? When you shift, I've worked jobs where you work early in the morning and then the next day you work at night. That really messes with your sleep schedule. It messes with your mind. Why would you want people who are trying to prevent people from dying to actually have to go through that? This is another example where you see that cuts and austerity do have consequences, real life and death consequences. Without the National Weather Service, there is no doubt in my mind hundreds, maybe even thousands of more people would be dead just this week in Oklahoma. They would. There's no way of going about it. If people weren't in their shelters, they would be dead. In addition to just the life-saving forecast that they do and the warnings that they give, the employees union of the National Weather Service actually made a list of how the effects of the cuts would do even more. What the cuts would do, they would quote. What would happen? It would be decreased accuracy of aviation, marine, fire, weather, and water level forecasts that will cost billions of dollars in flight delays and increased risk of lives and property. I mean, why is that important? It's not like we just had the friggin' government, re-up the FAA because of sequester cuts. This is going to be doing something very similar. It also reduced efficiency and accuracy for tornado events due to reduced alertness and short-staffed offices. Also, staffing shortages at the Hurricane Center will result in increased errors, which could be catastrophic. Less staff will be available to fly into hurricanes. Also, reduced ability to deploy weather support for wildfires and other emergencies. Also, a disruption in observations impacting weather model accuracy. Also, outages of critical meteorological, hydrological, satellite, and radar data because less employees will be available to fix system glitches. Help desks and parts warehouses will likely be short-staffed, resulting in further delays. But none of that is important, is it? None of that stuff's important. I mean, why do we want planes to fly safely, right? How's that important? Why do we want boats to be able to be safe? Why do we want hurricane warnings? Why do we want tornado warnings or flood warnings or wildfire warnings and support? Won't the market take care of all that? I mean, really, the free market will take care of all that stuff, won't it? Won't capitalism save you from a tornado? This is a prime example of the pure idiocy of austerity. This is a prime example of the pain and life-threatening stupidity of the race to the bottom that we're seeing again and again. Not only is the agency understaffed and overworked, due to the budget cuts that they've been having for decades, a lot of their equipment is actually out of date and failing. The Washington Post had a report that said, quote, "The cash-strapped National Weather Service is facing increasing scrutiny over its inferior computer modeling power compared to international peers and is anticipating a likely gap in weather satellite coverage. Last week, the Government Accountability Office ranked the pending satellite gap among the top 30 threats facing the federal government. The Department of Commerce warned that not only will the loss of satellite data and imagery diminish the quality of forecasts, but so will other important weather data surrendered by spending cuts." End quote. That's from the Washington Post. I mean, here's the deal. We have cut so much of the budget. We've cut their budget so much that they do not have the equipment or the staff to adequately do their job of saving lives. And again, this is the same, what we're talking about right there in that last quote. It's all about the cycle. We cut their budget so they can't get better equipment. And therefore it goes, and it's just this going down the drain. We are racing down the damn drain. It is sick. It is friggin' sick. And speaking of sickness here, folks, oh man. So we have the tale here. We're going to talk about the tale of two sick, twisted right-wing senators in Oklahoma when it comes to this tornado. One is, of course, the famous climate change denier James Inhofe, and the other is Tom Coburn. So both Inhofe and Coburn, for your information, were among the 36 Republican senators who voted against Hurricane Sandy disaster relief. They also voted against funding for FEMA. So that's who we're talking about here. Let's start out with Coburn. Coburn is at least being somewhat consistent in his horribleness. So here's the deal. Coburn does want federal money to aid money for Oklahoma. He does want the money. He just wants it to be offset by spending cuts somewhere else. Like, I don't know, where can we cut more money? Where can we cut some money? I don't know. Hey, I have an idea. Maybe we can cut some more from the National Weather Service. Why don't we do that? Let's cut some more from the National Weather Service to pay for aid to Oklahoma. Or how about this? I have another idea. Maybe we can cut teachers. How about that? Let's cut some of teachers, some of the teachers who literally use their bodies to block falling debris to save Oklahoma children. Why don't we cut some of them to offset it? Coburn, how about we cut their salaries and benefits, Coburn? So Coburn, the sick bastard, is holding aid to his own state hostage for even further austerity, which is evil, but again, like I said, it's consistently evil, okay? It's consistently evil, which takes us to the with evil Oklahoma senator, again, the famous climate change denying Senator James Inhofe. Climate change, which by the way, is making extreme weather events like this tornado more and more common. More and more tornadoes like this are going to happen because of climate change. But what do we care about science, right, James Inhofe? Anyway, though, Senator Inhofe, who again, let me point out again, voted against Hurricane Sandy disaster relief, Inhofe does in fact, surprise, surprise, want federal disaster money for the state of Oklahoma. In fact, he was on MSNBC where he had the following exchange. Take a listen to Senator Inhofe on MSNBC.
The president's going to speak in about 60 seconds, Senator, but I'd like to get a brief comment because, as you know, there were a number of people along the East Coast shore who were unhappy about your vote on Hurricane Sandy. In fact, you said that the request for funding was a slush fund. With all due respect, is there money to help the people here in your home state rebuild?
Well, let's look at that. That was totally different.
It was totally different. Let me explain to you how it was totally different. It was totally different because it happened in my state. That's why it's different. It happened in my state and not the East Coast. That is why it's totally different. And that's really important to remember. It's different because it affects me. It affects me and my state. And that's why it's different. And that's why I voted against aid for the East Coast, but I want aid for Oklahoma. That's what I want. He goes on. This again is Inhofe on MSNBC.
Look at that. That was totally different. They were getting things, for instance, that was supposed to be in New Jersey. They had things in the Virgin Islands. They were fixing roads there. They're putting roofs on houses in Washington, D.C. Everybody was getting in and exploiting the tragedy that took place. That won't happen in Oklahoma.
That's right. That won't happen in Oklahoma. Because people in Oklahoma are better than all you wussies over there on the East Coast. All you wussies on the East Coast whining for disaster relief. Oh, we want disaster relief. All you fancy, schmancy, mamby-pamby, highfalutin, arugula-eating East Coast liberal elitists wanting money for Hurricane Sandy relief. The East Coast doesn't deserve money for hurricane relief, but we in Oklahoma deserve it for tornado relief because unlike the East Coast, we here in Oklahoma are real Americans. Dear God, Inhofe is such a sick, twisted hypocrite. He is such a hypocrite. Oh, and by the way, folks, do you know which state in our union of 50 states, do you know which state actually has the third most federal emergency declarations, despite hating the evil federal government? Do you know who has the third most emergency declarations? I know you're going to be shocked to hear this. It actually is the state of Oklahoma, where the federal disasters come waving down the plain. I mean, I know you're shocked. You're shocked, right? The state that has the most federal disasters and declarations is actually that other federal government hating state, the state of Texas. They hate them so much they have the most declarations, followed by California. But here's the deal. So Oklahoma is actually statistically right behind those two, Texas and California, despite the fact that their state has only 3.8 million people compared to 26 million in Texas and 38 million in California. Oklahoma is actually just right behind them, like just a few disasters away. And look, I don't think I need to shoot down Inhofe's idiotic hypocrisy. But again, Hurricane Sandy did not just hit New Jersey. It hit most of the East Coast. It hit people in Maryland. It hit people in New York. It hit people in Delaware. It hit people in Massachusetts. But whatever. What is the point? What is the point here of debating a man like Inhofe who doesn't believe in science? Why even bother? There's no point. It's like debating a fern. And look, obviously, and I'm sure 99 to 100% of progressives, of course we want Oklahoma to get all the disaster relief they need. Of course we do. So maybe Oklahoma, can we ask you a favor? Oklahoma, maybe you can do the rest of us a solid. Maybe you can vote out the evil bastards who don't extend the same decency, the same kindness, the same basic humanity to the rest of the country. Maybe you can vote those guys out for us. We'll be right back.